Hi, everybody. This is GPAL joining you all from Bethesda, Maryland. We have a packed agenda today. We're going to get started. Good to see you all. So today we're going to be learning Git and GitHub. That's going to be the agenda for today. The first thing I want to do is I want to do a quick poll of where people stand when it comes to GitHub. So if you have zero experience with Git or GitHub, type in +1. Okay, awesome. So if you have no experience, don't worry. We're going to run through the basics. This is specifically meant for you all. We're going to go through the basics. We're going to explain everything. So you're going to be in good shape. So, but if you have some kind of experience with Git or GitHub, can you just type in +2? Okay, so it seems like we have an even split of people who have some kind of experience with GitHub and some people who don't have experience with Git and GitHub. It's no problem at all. We're going to run through the basics. We're also going to explain some concepts like branching, and I hope that's going to be helpful for those who are a bit more experienced with GitHub. So just a little bit about me. My name is Giri. I go by GPAL. I'm a self-taught programmer, and since June, I've been teaching live Python and SQL courses. This is the first Git and GitHub course, so I really look forward to getting your feedback at the end of it so that we can keep on improving it. And I have a keen interest in learning and teaching programming. This is something that I've been doing for a long time. It's good to do this. I enjoy doing this. So what's the game plan for today? The goal is really that I want every one of you here to have a good grasp of what Git and GitHub is, and I want you to be empowered to be able to use it for your own personal projects or any work that you're doing. So I hope to kind of explain the intuition behind Git and why it's helpful. We're going to be learning the basic commands like, how do you create a repository? How do you branch? And so on. And at the same time, we're going to be applying our skills, applying all the things that we learn through hands-on exercises so that you get a feel for how it works. It's not just theory, but it's actually something that you can practice and have experience doing. And there are 3 principles that guide the way that I teach these classes. First is that I believe that we learn best by practice. So I'm going to keep the talking as minimal as I can, and we're going to focus far more on the practical component of this. The second thing that guides me when it comes to these classes is the 80-20 rule. And it's the idea that, look, 80% of the value of learning Git and GitHub comes from learning 20% of the commands and the concepts. And the focus today is going to be primarily on the most important parts. So it's not going to be 100% thorough, but you're going to be able to get the basics that allows you to do a lot of cool things. And the third thing is that peer-to-peer learning, I think, makes learning a lot more fun. And that's the reason why we have a separate Discord server app. And this is the place that you can ask questions and you can get updates for all kinds of future classes. So for those who have not signed up for that Discord server app, this is the link to that. You can sign up for that right now. And for those who are new, I just want to quickly demonstrate our Discord server app, the specific channels that you need to take a look at. So today, if you have any questions, the place to go to is the programming exercises channel specifically. You can post your questions. I'll be there to answer questions. Other peers will be there to help you out as well. So this is the specific channel that's of greatest relevance. And beyond that, we have other channels as well, but that's not the focus for today. So what is Git to begin with? So the textbook definition is that it's a distributed version control system, but that's not that super helpful. So let's try to break it down. Let's try to focus specifically on the version control system. So here's the way to think about it. When you're coding, you're going to be writing code, you're going to be trying out new features, you're going to be downloading new packages. But as you go along this process, it's possible that somewhere along the way, something that you do ends up breaking the code. So it is super helpful to have some way of saving and tracking your files so that should anything nasty happen, your code breaks, you can revert back to the working model. That's something that's super helpful. One way that you can do that is just to save it as, Python 1, Python 2, Python 3, etc. But that's not an elegant solution. That's not practical. So the nice thing about Git is that it allows you to take snapshots of your code, and should something happen, you can revert back to the model that works. You can revert back to the code that works. So that's what a version control system is. So what does distributed mean, though? Essentially, when you have a distributed system, what that means is that everybody has a copy of the main repository itself. And a repository is sort of a storage folder. So the best way to think about this is to contrast it with what a centralized version control system is. So in a centralized version control system, the one to the left, what you have is this one server, and all the people who work on it have just directly work with the repository itself. So when you're in a team, you don't have a local copy of that repository itself. So that's what a centralized system is. But when it comes to a distributed version control system, what happens is there's this central repository still, but what happens is each person on the team is able to create their own local repository, which is a clone of this central repository. And you can start doing your edits, you can update it to your local repository itself, and then when you're ready, you can push the changes to the central repository. So that's the distinction between a centralized version control system and a distributed version control system. I want to pause here and ask you, what do you think are some of the benefits of using a distributed version control system? Just type out your answer. What are the benefits you think associated with using a distributed version control system as opposed to a central version control system? All right, keep your answers flowing in. All right, 30 more seconds, and then I'll sum it up. Okay, lots of interesting answers. Okay, so great. All the answers are interesting. So one of the benefits associated with using a distributed version control system is that should the central server fail, you're still going to be in good shape because each member on the team has a clone of that central repository. So it's less vulnerable to some kind of a crash happening, something nasty happening to the central server itself. So that's one benefit associated with using a distributed version control system. And another benefit associated with using a distributed control version system also is that each person has their own local repository. So because of this, when it comes to updating your stuff, you can do it locally. You don't have to get connected with the network. That's another benefit in terms of convenience. And additionally, when it comes to just updating the repository, it's a lot easier because each member on the team has their own local copy. of the repository itself. So Git, to sum up, is this distributed version control system. Now, this is still theory. After a while, when you try it out, you're going to get a hang of what this is. Now, the next thing is, what is GitHub? Right? That's another question that people have. So the first thing I want to say is GitHub isn't equal to Git. So the way to think about this is Git is a tool, while Git is a tool that allows you to track all these changes. But GitHub is a service that allows you to manage projects that use Git. And apart from GitHub, there are other competitors as well, but GitHub is by far the most frequently used service out there to manage these Git projects. So remember in the previous slide, I showed you saying that, look, Git is a distributed version control system. Now, the way to think about GitHub is that GitHub is this online central repository that hosts all these, that's kind of the ultimate source code. So it's a repository hosting service. It's, if you want to use public repositories, it's free, but if you want to have private repositories, it does cost money. And the nice thing also about GitHub is that it gives you a graphical user interface to manage to keep track of files. But Git, on the other hand, is a command line based tool. So that's another difference between Git and GitHub. So what's a typical workflow in Git? So this is going to be important conceptually. After this, we're going to get our hands dirty and do our exercises together. So here's the thing. There's a local space and then there's remote space. So think of the remote repository as GitHub, right? And then everything else here is the local space. So the working directory is what is the space that you're going to be working. You create new files, you update new files. That's the working directory. And after you are ready to save these files, to commit these files, what you do is that you add these files to the staging area if you're ready to take a snapshot of them, if you're ready to commit these files. And then you commit, and then what happens is you save these files in the local repository. But everything is still happening in the local space. Nothing has been pushed to the remote repository, right? So you can keep on taking snapshots of your work. And after a while, when you're ready to push these changes to the remote repository, you would say git push, and you can push it. And if you want to pull from the remote repository to the local space, you use git pull. Now, this is just me trying to lay out what we're going to be doing today. But as we do these exercises together, things are going to become a lot clearer. So don't worry if it doesn't make sense. I just want to sketch out what we're going to be doing today so that it fits in nicely later on. So now we're going to get started with Git itself. Now, you can use your own command line. Some people would have Git install. Some people may not have Git install. So just to level the playing ground for everybody, I searched and I found this wonderful tool called Coda that gives you access to a browser-based command line. And the nice thing is that it comes pre-installed with Git itself. So go ahead and go to this link and create an account, and we're going to get started with Git and then later on connecting it with GitHub. So go ahead, click this link, and when you're ready, just sound out, and then we can get started. You can use your own terminal. One of the questions that people had was, can we use our own terminal? You can, but just make sure that you have Git installed. But if you don't have Git installed, or if you're unsure, I would suggest that you just go here. It's just, it's a lot simpler for the time being. Yeah, I can post the link. Take a minute, create the account, and then we're going to get started with the actual coding itself. Okay, when you're done, just sound out so that we can keep moving on. Okay, it seems that people are pretty much done. Okay, anyone has any issues coming to this stage? All's fine? Okay, great. So it seems that most people are ready. So let's get started. So the first thing that you want to do is just to check if so this is a command line. For those who don't know, a command line gives you direct access to the operating system. So the first thing that you want to do is check the version of Git that you have. So you type in git -- version. Right? And you should get this. If you're doing it on your own command line, type this out. If you get a response and it's legal, then it's a good sign that it's a sign that you do have Git. Okay, great. So we're going to be using the command line. Some people may have some experience with the command line. Some people may not. Let me just run through a couple of basic commands that help you work on the command line. So the first is pwd. It is called present working directory, and it tells you where you are right now. Right, so that's pwd. The next command line that's going to be helpful is called ls, which means list. It just gives you a list of files. And in this case, ls gives us a blank response. It means that this specific folder that we're working on is empty. There's nothing there right now. And then another useful command is, we're not going to be using it today, but it's also helpful, is mkdir, which means create a folder, make a directory. And then this is a command we're going to be using later. It's called touch. And then so touch means create a new file. So you can say touch j.text, whatever you want. So touch means create a new file. So these are commands that we're going to be using later on. Okay, great. So the first thing we want to do after we check that Git has been installed is to key in the configuration terms. So we want to say git config -- global user .name. This is just so that we can keep track of what we're doing, and we can save it based on this username and email. So I would say gpow. Right. Go ahead, do that. Okay, and then the next thing you want to do is you want to enter the user.email. So git config -- global user.email, and then enter your email. Okay, great, you're done with that. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, great. Okay, so I think most people are fine. Okay, good. Now, the first thing we want to do is we want to initialize this. We want to initialize Git within this tutorial folder. So the way that we do that is we say git in it, and then it's going to tell you that you have initialized an empty Git repository in the folder. So now we have Git that's initialized within this repository, right? So that's done. So now if you want to check whether the Git has been in fact initialized, what you do is you type in ls -a, right? What this -la does is that it shows you all the files, all the directories, even if they're hidden. So in this case, whenever there's a dot in front of a folder, it's a hidden folder, it's a subdirectory. But after we type in -a, after ls, it's going to show you all the hidden files as well. So it does show you that there's in fact this .git folder here. Okay, so now let's go ahead and let's say we're going to create a website. Okay, let's just say hypothetically we're creating a website and we want to create the home page. Okay, so we would say touch homepage.html. Right, just go ahead, do that for the moment. I'll explain what's going on here. And let's say we also create a sign up page. Let's say we create a login page, touch login.html. Now, when you type in ls, what you're going to see is that now this folder has both these files, right? Homepage.html, login.html. Now, if you have your own editor of choice, if you're doing it within your own command line, you can actually open up and edit. But today we're not going to get to that. The focus is going to be on Git and GitHub. So let's just keep plugging along. So we've just created these HTML files. Great. Now let's say you want to know what's the status of your Git. So for that, you just type in Git Status. And what do you find? It tells you that, look, you have these two files called homepage.html and login.html, but these are untracked, right? So we haven't tracked it. What that means is these are files that are in our working directory, but they're not in our staging directory yet. So let me just go back to this workflow here. So right now, these files are in our working directory. If we want to commit them, the first step is to add them so that they enter the staging area. So think of the staging area as the intermediary area, right? So if we want to commit them, the first step is we say, let's go ahead and let's add them, right? So we say, look, let's say we want to add the homepage HTML first. Git add homepage HTML. Let's say we want to get a status update. We type in Git Status. Now it tells you, look, this file is ready to be committed. It's in the staging area. But this file, login.html, it's still not ready to be staged. Now, suppose you added a file in the staging area, but you want to remove it. How do you do that? You say, look, git rm -- cached, and then you enter the name of the file. Take a look at the status again. Now it tells you, look, there's nothing, we're not tracking anything yet. Now, suppose you have a ton of files, right? And you want to add them. Instead of adding them one by one, one of the things that you can do is you can say git add dot, that period. That essentially means, look, let's add all the files. Let's push all the files to the staging area. So you do that. And now if you take a look at the status update again, now it tells you, look, these are the changes that are ready to be committed. So now going back to this chart, so from our working directory, we have added these files to the staging area. Now let's say we want to take a snapshot just to be sure. We want to save this. We need to save it in a local repository. We use the keyword git commit. So let me show you how that works. So we say git commit -m, and then you type in a message, kind of a comment. Added homepage and login files. Okay, now we take a look at Git Status. Now it says there's nothing to commit, and the working directory is clean because now we have moved it from the staging area to the local repository. So there isn't anything in the staging area, so it's empty. So that's the reason why in the status update you find that there's nothing to commit. It tells you that look, that's it. We have already committed that and saved it in our as a local repository. Now, suppose you want to take a look at all the commits that you have done. Right, the way that you do that is you'd say Git Log. Right, and it tells you, look, who is the author of this change, when was this change done, and what was the specific change that you implemented. So let's go ahead, just to make sure we get this concept. Let's go ahead. Whoops. Let's see what's wrong here. Give me one moment. Give me 1 second. Let me just get back to that same stage so that it's easier. Just give me one moment. One second, folks. All right, great. So we're back on track. Let's say we want to add a new file. All right, so we have saved our first local repository. So let's go back to our working directory. So let's go back and let's say we want to create a new file called thankyou.html. Right. So let's just do that. Now we go to Git Status. What does it tell us? It says that, look, you have this new HTML file that's untracked. So we know the procedure. So the way that we go about saving this in our local repository is by saying first git add the name of the file, and then git commit added thank you page. Okay, and then now if you take a look at the Git log again, it tells you that, look, you made these two commits, and it gives us the comment as well. All right, so it seems that some people are sort of lost. So if you have any questions, I'm going to just pause here for 2 minutes before we move on to the concept of branching. So if you have any questions, this is a good time to ask on our Discord server app or on the YouTube channel. So if you have any questions, if you're kind of lost, just tell me where you're lost so that we can just quickly run through that. Okay, so one of the questions was, what does -m mean? Think of it as just leaving a message. Right? Think of it as a way to, it's a flag that allows you to leave a comment. Right. Just one more minute, and then I'll move on to branching. So if you have any questions, go ahead, ask it right now so that we can help. So just to give people a sense of what just happened here. So this is the big picture that you need to be aware of, in the background. So when you're just working with files, this is your working directory. And if you want to save these files in a local repository, you first add them to your staging area. Just think of it as the intermediary area. And then when you're ready, from the staging area, you commit the file so that it moves to the local repository. And think of the local repository as just a way of taking a snapshot of your work so that if anything happens, you can fall back onto a snapshot that works, a version of your code that was functioning. Okay, we're going to move next to branching, but I just want to make sure that everybody is okay with what we have just done so far. Okay, one of the questions was, where is the local repository start? Everything is just locally. It's start locally. Right. Another question was, do we need to run git push to see files in GitHub? Yep, and that's going to be coming next. We're going to be covering that very soon. So after we finish branching, we're going to focus on how we can push the code to a remote repository, how you can push it to GitHub itself. Okay, just one final round of questions. We're going to get to the GitHub section later on. So first branching, and then we're going to go to GitHub. Okay, so let's move to the concept of branching. So suppose you are working in a team and you decide to do something interesting. Let's say you want to work on a new animation page, for this website that you're working on, but you're worried that working on these animations could possibly break the code base. You don't want to do that. So what you want to do is essentially you want to branch off. So think of it as you're on this one path, and then you decide to just branch off to try something new. So that's what branching is. So you want to branch, and if things are fine, you want to branch, kind of merge back to the main branch itself. So let me just show you how it works, and then everything is going to make sense. So if you want to create a new branch, right, what you do is you type in git branch, and let's say we're going to create this new animation page. So we just type in animation, right? Okay, fine. Now, when you type in git branch, it tells you all the different branches that you have on your Git. And what you find is that master is still highlighted. So master is by default the branch that you're going to be in. But it also tells us that, we also have this new which branch you're on is to type in Git Status. And it tells you that, look, you're still on the master branch. Okay, fine. We're still on our master branch. Now, how do we change branch? How do we switch to the animation branch? Because we want to branch out and do something interesting, right? So the way that you do that is you type in git branch, and then type in git checkout, and then the name of the branch, so animation. And it tells you that, look, now we have switched to the animation branch. And suppose you want to verify that, the way that you do that is you type in git status. Now you find that it says that you are on the animation branch right now. Okay, so we're now on the animation branch. Great. So let's say we want to just take a look at the files that we have in this branch, right? When you type in ls, you find that you have all the previous files that you created on the main branch itself. So whatever was on the main branch, right now you still have it on the new branch called animation, right? That's great. Let's say we want to create the new file called animation.html. So we type in touch animation.html. So on top of all the files that we had in our main branch, now we have added this animation.html file as well. So let's go ahead and repeat the same rhythm. Let's go ahead and let's commit this change. So we type in git add animation.html. So now it's moving it from the working directory to the staging directory. Fine. Now we want to move it from the staging directory and saving it in our local repository. Right, we say git commit added animation file. Now, if you take a look at Git Status, it shows you that there's nothing to commit. Our working directory is clean because we moved it all to the staging directory and then later on to our local repository. So right now, think of it this way. All this while, we have been on the master branch, and now we have just created a new branch called animation branch, and we are on the animation branch right now. Let's go back to our main branch, which is the master branch. And the way that we do that is, if you want to switch branches, it's git check out, and we want to go back to the master branch, so we type in master. Right, so you take a look at, so now we are back on the master branch. So we could git status. Now you find that you are in fact on the master branch. Now remember, on the animation branch, we created this new file called animation.html, right? So let's say we want to take a look at what do we have on our master branch. Are we going to have the animation file? Nope, because this file was created on the animation branch, not on the master branch itself. So when you type in ls to get a list of the files, find that you don't have the animation.html file, right? Suppose you want to merge back the change that you made in the animation branch back onto the master branch. The way that you do that is you type in git merge and the name of the branch that you want to merge, right? And that's going to be git merge animation. Now it tells you that, look, there's one file that was changed. Okay, great. Now if you take a look at ls, now you find that, in fact, you do have the animation file back on the main branch itself. So the way to think about it is branching is a good way for you to experiment, try new things, and if things work, you can merge those changes back. So that's the way to think about branching. Any questions about branching? Are these things all making sense? Next, we're going to be moving on to the GitHub component. Exactly how can we push all the stuff that we have done locally onto your own remote repository? So I'm just going to pause here for a second. Any questions about branching before we move on to the exciting part where we push our files to GitHub itself? So one of the questions was, how do we make a branch again? It's just type in git branch and then the name of the branch. Right. Merging can be quite a complex topic. I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of it, specifically, how do you merge when there's a conflict and so on. We're not going to be covering that because today I just want to focus on the basics itself. So I think I just want to mainly cover the basics. So that's going to be the focus as we keep going along. So far, let's move on to the GitHub component. I think that's really exciting. So far, whatever we have done, we have just saved it locally, right? We haven't pushed it to our GitHub repository. So now we're going to be learning how to do that. So first of all, go ahead and create a GitHub account if you don't. But if you do have a GitHub account, great. Just go ahead and start a new project. I'm just going to pause here so that everybody gets here. So go to the create a new repository page. Okay, and now you want to name your repository something, right? Give it a name. Let's say it's class 01. You can give it a description, practice repo, right? It's all going to be public by default. You can have it private, but it costs money. So public, let's just keep it public. We don't need a README folder. So let's just go ahead, create that repository. And now you should see this. So this isn't important for us right now because we have already created a repository on our command line. This is what we need to take a look at. So it says, look, this is how we push an existing repository from the command line itself. So great. So the first thing that we do is we go ahead, copy this command. So essentially what we're doing is right now we are adding this new remote repository. So go to the Git playground. Right, go ahead, add that. Okay. So essentially what we have done here is that we have added this new repository and it's called origin, right? And now when we run this command git remote, we find that you see this origin listed here. Okay, great, that's fine. The next thing you want to do is you want to push from the master branch onto origin. So that's what's happening here, right? So we do that. Let's go ahead and do that. It's going to ask you for your username and GitHub password. So go ahead, key that in. Okay. Key in the password. Okay, so now essentially what we have done is we have said, look, whatever is happening locally, whatever is happening in our master branch, push it to our remote repository, which is called origin. So now, if you take a look at your GitHub repository, you should be able to see all the files here. Right, did everybody get here? Any questions about this? Any issues along the way? Right, did everybody see the changes reflected in your remote repository? Okay, I'm seeing some positive answers. Okay. All right. So it seems like some people had some kind of a fatal error. Just a quick question. Did you all, are you all working on the Git playground on Katacoda, or are you all working on your own command lines? Yeah, for those who, okay, so another question was, what happens if you're working on your own pre-existing repository? Okay, it seems like okay, that's an issue. All right, so another question was, wait, let's see. So what's the naming convention when it comes to repositories? I mean, for the moment, because we're just practicing, it doesn't matter. This is just practicing. Eventually, you want to have names that do have some kind of meaning behind them, so it's helpful for you later on when you take a look at it, and for others to work on it. So remember, we talked about how GitHub is this graphical user interface. So a lot of the stuff that we just did, like creating a new file, uploading a new file, and so on, we can actually do it using GitHub itself. So think of it this way. A lot of the stuff that we did using Git, we can use GitHub to do it. But I think it's a lot more powerful when you have Git, because it just gives you a lot more options. It's just a raw power. You see what's under the hood. Okay, are we any issues along the way? Any issues with getting this up on GitHub? I want to make sure that everybody gets the files pushed onto GitHub. Right, some people have this fatal remote origin access error. Okay, if you have any errors along the way, go ahead and put it on the programming exercises channel so that I can help and others are able to chip in as well. All right, so one of the questions that's popping up is, what's the command that we use to link with GitHub? So let me go ahead and share that with you all. All right, let me go ahead and share that right now. Okay. It seems like some people are having some issues along the way. So I don't want to hold back the rest. I just want to kind of give a quick summary of the stuff that we have covered. I'm going to stay here. There are going to be others helping out as well. So just to give you a quick summary. So Git is a tool that allows you to keep track of the work that you're doing. It allows you to revert back to versions that work and so on. So that's the nice thing about Git. And the nice thing about GitHub is that it serves as this remote repository that you can push your changes to, and other team members can collaborate with you using GitHub. So that's just kind of the Cliff Notes version of Git and GitHub. So today we just kind of ran through the basic commands on Git as well as GitHub. I'm going to be sharing notes from this class so that if you are lost somehow, you want to refer back to something, you have some kind of a reference you can fall back onto. Next week, I'm going to be taking a break. And then after that, we're going to keep on plugging along, trying out new things, such as learning a little bit more about cybersecurity, cryptocurrencies. There's a Python for data science course coming up again. So these are things that are going to be happening in the weeks ahead. But next week, I'm going to be taking a break. So 2 weeks from now, we're going to have classes again. So I'm going to be sharing with you the notes later on so that if there's anything you can fall back onto. So that kind of concludes this class. I'm going to still hang around so that we can debug and help everybody get on the same page. If you like these classes and you wish to support me. This is the link. You can buy me a coffee if you want to. But I'm just gonna I'm gonna stick around here. If you have any questions, DM me on Discord server app. I'm also going to be here on YouTube, so go ahead and ask me any questions so that I can help you out. Thank you, everybody.